really excited to have Henish Pulickal with us here tonight. Henish is a 2002 graduate from our Michigan Alpha chapter at the University of Michigan, where he studied economics and psychology, and then went on to get a master's in public administration from Syracuse. Ever since 2002, Henish has been working in the real estate industry, where he's done underwriting, sales, servicing, management, and has built an incredibly successful career for himself, where he is now the CEO of the California Home Company, and to date has done over $1 billion with a B dollars in transactions and mortgages. We're incredibly happy to have Henish here with us, one, from his experience, but two, just the number of places that he's been able to share it. He's been a guest speaker at many a conference, seminar, sat on many a panel. And not only does he do incredibly well in his career, but he also is giving back to his community in the process. Henish volunteers with a childhood cancer society, as well as sits on a board for a women's health organization and nonprofit. On top of that, he loves spending time with his family, getting active with sand volleyball, basketball as well. And if you're looking for a new podcast, I highly recommend going to check out I've Got a Theory on wherever you check out your podcasts. They're wildly entertaining and looks really into the thinking side of life. And I know you're definitely going to enjoy it, which Henish is the great host of. So enough from me. Happy to turn it over to Henish. Take it away.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate that. And guys, I appreciate your attention and joining in and wanting to learn something. So I'm going to share what I can. And talking about authenticity isn't something that I've done a lot. So with my podcast, I had the opportunity to interview with this guy named Trav Bell out of Australia. And he just wrote a book called The Bucket List Blueprint. And he's like the bucket list guy. And you can look him up, and he's got this coaching business, right? Coaching is kind of like executive coaching, personal coaching business that he's now grown to 22 countries and 10,000 coaches that now are part of his franchise. And so I said, hey, I've got to do this talk on authenticity. Give me some tips. And so he gave me some tips. And so if you do subscribe to my podcast and you see his episode come out in a few weeks, you're going to hear some of those tips come out and how this formatted out. So really interesting guy. He's been there, done that, seen everything. That's why he's literally the bucket list dude. And it was good to talk to him, because I feel like I've checked off most of these things on most people's bucket lists, but more importantly, I was able to get some information to how to get together a presentation for authenticity that would be relevant to you guys. So some of the things he said, is like, be vulnerable, and deliver, share. When you're sharing your stories, make sure you're sharing the behind the scenes and not just the highlight reel, right? And that's what you see a lot of times on people's social media, and what they're presenting is that, hey, look at all these wins that I've gotten. Everything I do is a success. And that's not the case, right? You're going to have things that you don't do as well, or that don't go as well, and you're supposed to learn from those. So what I wanted to do is share a couple stories of times that didn't go well for me and what I learned from it, and hopefully that displays a little bit of authenticity and what kind of takeaways you can have for it. So setting the stage for the first story is literally a year ago, maybe first week of March last year, right? We're deep into coronavirus. Everything is shut down. They probably sent you home from school. You probably moved back in with your parents or whatever might have happened. And it was the day that they said, hey, it's now a permanent stay-at-home order. All non-essential businesses are closed. Nothing can happen. Does anyone remember that? Yeah. Okay. So for me, I have a rental apartment behind my house, and the guys that were living there just moved out. They got recalled back to Norway. They were Norwegian grad students here at UCSD in San Diego. And so I was using that as my office, because I don't have a home office, because my office is a couple miles away and it's easy to come to my business place. So I was using that backspace, and then I got these stay-at-home orders, and then like I got that crap moment. Like, everything's closed. We can't show houses. Real estate is an essential business. And I literally at the time owned about $7 to $8 million in houses that were in various stages of rehab, because I flip houses too. And that's kind of one of my primary businesses in real estate, is flipping houses. And so I was like, this is going to be a debacle, right? I'm sitting on all this money. I've got investors, I've got lenders that I owe money. And now this is the recession. This is what's going to happen. And I was really scared. I can't say that I cried. Trav said I should cry if I have something to cry about, but I can't say I cried, but I thought about it. And I was like, this is a really scary moment, because this is my livelihood. Am I going to have to move to a more affordable part of town? What am I going to do? And so it was pretty scary. So I even called my attorney at the time. He's still my attorney. He's a good friend of mine. I said, hey, it's hit the fan. Do I need to file bankruptcy? Right. And that's a scary conversation to have with your attorney when you have several $1 million worth of real estate and you don't know if things are going to go sour. So he said, absolutely not. That's the nuclear option. We don't need to go that route just yet. Let's ride this out and see what happens. Because it was just day one of the stay-at-home order and everything was non-essential. So, I let myself be bummed out for about a day. And then I said, let me get back to what I do best. And so I said, let me do check my options. And I've got a few options here. And one is bury my head in the sand and hope my problems go away, which is kind of the passive opportunity here. Just kind of do nothing and assume it goes away. But I'm a big boy now. I've got kids to pay for and businesses to take care of and a bunch of people on payroll that I need to pay for. And so I didn't think that was going to be a good option. So what I had to do is double down on what I know is effective. And that's basically contacting everyone I knew, building rapport, creating opportunities, and kind of shaking the tree to see what things are going to fall out, right? Getting a feel for it, listening to people's problems. And when I call people, it's interesting because I do a different tactic than I might have done 15, 20 years ago, maybe even 5 or 10 years ago, which is I call and ask about them. I ask about what's going on in their world, what's going on with your business, what's going on with your family. Is the pandemic affecting you personally, health-wise, et cetera? What can I do to help? Right. And I'll always ask that to people because I want to come from a place of service and contribution. And that stands out in a world of when people are saying, look at me, pay attention to me, buy something from me, let me sell you something. It's really refreshing when I get that same call when someone calls me up and says, hey, what can I do to help you? What can I do to help your business? Who can I introduce you to? Who can I refer you to? So I did that. And that's how I do my phone calls, right? That's how I grow my business is I have those conversations with people because that allows me to create the opportunity to create rapport and create opportunities, right? So how did it work out? Well, as you all know, the real estate market is on fire. It took a couple months off when people couldn't show houses and everyone was scared of letting people into their properties because they thought they'd all get sick and die. That obviously did affect some people, but others it didn't. And so people went back to buying houses at a premium. And as you know now, if you're following the real estate market at all, it's extremely hot market and the recessions happen, right? GDP has decreased quarter over quarter for several quarters in a row, which indicates that we are in a recession, but it just hasn't affected the housing market. And so if you want my take on that, that's another conversation. But basically, I feel like rates are low. And if you haven't lost your job due to the pandemic, you want to buy a nice house. So that's kind of what's happened and people are paying for it. Some other people in the industry, when I'd call them and say, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? They're like, oh, this is some serious stuff. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm basically going to go start put my head down and work on some other projects because real estate isn't going to cut it, and so they kind of gave up, which was sad. I wasn't going to try to convince them otherwise, but I knew that wasn't the tactic that I wanted to do because one, I had no option because I owned a bunch of properties, and two, that was my business. I wasn't going to quit and do something else because that's not going to work, right? So, like in that case, I guess, the question is like, how was I authentic? I suppose I was true to myself in terms of what it took for me to get to where I was. And that was the hard work, the perseverance, the service to others, and having that attitude of trying to help others and not quitting, otherwise I would have been disingenuous if I just try to bury myself in the sand and say, I'm going to hope this goes away and maybe the government bails me out, right? That's not really a great solution. Because, if you're a leader, you want to put the weight on your own shoulders and solve that problem. Does that make sense? Okay, so next story number 2 that I want to share is, long story short, after grad school, I decided grad school in New York, and that was about 2013. I decided to come back to San Diego after advice of one of my counselors and mentors at grad school. And I came right back to San Diego, and I liked real estate. I was good at it. It's been my business. I've been in real estate mortgages since 2002. So after calling a bunch of people, and one guy said, hey, I know a guy that has a flipping business, and keep in mind this is 2013, that has a house flipping business, and he's been doing it a long time, and he's basically retiring, and he needs someone to take over his company because he's built a pretty good machine here. So met with him, met with his company, met with the staff, got the job as CEO. He moved to Hawaii is what happened, right? So I was like, this is pretty cool. I get the big chair and the leather seat and the wood desk, and sitting in this office and doing work and learning a lot about flipping houses, because I hadn't done that up until that point. I had my real estate license, but I hadn't been flipping houses. Quickly found out that the owner's ethics and values didn't match my own. And more specifically, that he didn't have any ethics or values, right? He was one of those guys that would try to get the deal, try to get the property by any means necessary. That meant lying to people, tricking them, forging documents, trying to persuade them, et cetera, et cetera. It was really ugly. And I was like, within a few months, I found out how nasty he could be, even just remotely, even though I only met him a few times in person, because he was always working remotely from Hawaii. And I found out why is because literally people were trying to beat him up. We had to have like a locked office because he had burned so many bridges in San Diego that people were like coming for him. And so he had like multiple lawyers on retainer to fight off all the lawsuits that he had coming towards him. So that's kind of a brutal situation to be in. And I'm sitting there, and now I've got the CEO label on my business card for this company. I don't need that target on my back. So as you could ascertain, I didn't want to stay in that role. I never worked in that way. I didn't want to have that kind of reputation of this guy that cheats and lies to people to get deals done. And so I left the company, and I said, I think I could just start my own company that does something similar, but then is just honest to people, right? I can just tell you the truth. Here's what I think I can do to help you with your house or sell your house and make it a win-win. Here's how much money I hope to make. No tricks, no lies, no forged documents, no nothing. And just keep it honest. And that way, those same people that do business with me refer me to their people. And so now I'm still doing deals with people years and years in a row, which has worked out very well for me, as opposed to trying to trick someone into doing one deal and then having them be pissed at me for the rest of their life and then having that reputation go around, right? I mean, plus I have a unique name. I couldn't really afford to be the Henish in San Diego that rips people off, because there wasn't another Henish I could point at and say it was the other guy, right? It's not going to happen. It's just me. So, and now that company that I started in 2014 is the same company that I own now. It's branched into a few different companies as well, that now I own a construction company and another investment company. And so a few other service companies that I own as well, which is nice because it all stemmed from that. So, the lesson for me there was that by staying true to my values, I was able to learn that I could lead my own successful business without having to cheat people, right? And that's how this other person had led his whole life. But now, I don't know how he's going to end off. But I remember at one point, one of the coworkers, when I was trying to answer a security question to log into one of his systems for something, the question was, "What's my best friend's name?" Right? And I was trying to pretend to him, and I asked one of his coworkers that had worked with him for years. I was like, "What's his best friend's name?" He's like, "That he doesn't have any friends." I was like, brutal. And so it just shows that kind of lifestyle, maybe you could make some money, but it's depending on what you think is successful. It meant he had no relationships, no wife, no kid, no friends. So not necessarily the way you'd want to go if you want to have a long lasting career and or have some kind of reputation within your town, city, state, nation. Doesn't matter where you're at, because the world's getting smaller by the minute. You guys following everything good so far? Making sense? Okay. So last story goes all the way back to college, right when I was in your shoes in college, trying to get a job. And this one is maybe not as cry worthy, but I remember going to job fairs, filling out applications, getting interviews, calling people. I don't think LinkedIn or anything like that existed back then. So we had the computer, but it just wasn't as useful as it is now. So I remember starting to get lots of rejection letters. And it's like, "Thank you for interviewing. You had great talents. We've decided to move forward with other applicants, yada, yada." Maybe you guys have seen some of these, but I started stapling them to my wall of my senior year house that I lived in with 6 other SIG apps. And, it was probably doing damage to the wall, but I knew we weren't getting our deposit back anyways. So next thing I know, I had like 30 plus letters up there that I'd been interviewing with all these different companies and just getting shot down left and right. And, people come over and read a few and like, "Why do you have this wall of rejection letters?" And it was like, well, one, it was to kind of motivate my friends that didn't have interviews or had very few. I'm like, just get the interview, just try to get out there and practice. And even if it was with companies that I didn't necessarily want to work with, it was great going in there and practicing and learning how to do an interview good in real life, even if it was with a company I didn't have. So, 30 plus letters later, I finally got the job that that I took right out of college. And I was in the same company for over 7 years, got multiple promotions, and it set me up with all the experience and lessons and contacts that led me to start my own businesses and go into consulting and stuff like that, which was great. But the lesson is you got to keep trying, you got to keep practicing, and you can't hit balls you're not swinging for. So you can't sit on your hands and hope things will work out. So that same lesson that I told you that affected me during coronavirus, of having to double down on working, connecting with people, creating rapport, was the same thing I had to do in college, where I was just like, let me stack up interviews and clear the time to make it happen, because I don't want to graduate from college and not, and sit on my hands and hope, and complain that I didn't get a job when I didn't try. Right. So I think the key thing that I've learned over the years is that almost everything that you do involves an element of sales or persuasion. Right. So you should get good at it, practice it, learn it, do books on it. Even if you're an accountant or a tech person or whatever you're going to be, you have to convince your boss you're doing a good job. Because even if objectively you've achieved everything you need to, you still have to convince him you're doing a good job, because someone else is going to get the promotion that he likes better. Because unfortunately, people make decisions emotionally a lot of times, right? And you might not like that. It's just what happens. I see it in the real estate business all the time. Like, you can have a nice, pretty house. If the feng shui or the layout's not right, someone's not going to like the way it looks, because because they want to connect with it emotionally, right? And that's the same thing with promotions, with relationships. You'll get people say, oh, I like that person, I want to do a deal with them, or I got a good feeling from them, or I got a good vibe from them. So a lot of times when I do deals, I'll encourage them to meet you in person, because I want to try to put that out as best as possible, that I've got a good vibe, I've got good energy, you can trust me, I'm going to be honest with you. And that's kind of the lesson that happens, when I was interviewing for jobs, is to get good at convincing people that was on the other side that I might be good at their job. And obviously I wasn't, because I wouldn't have had 30 rejection letters. I would have had 30 acceptance letters, and I would have been able to choose and pick. But you get better at it over the years, and it's good to identify those things that are important life skills to get through. So, that's kind of how Trav told me to outline this presentation, tell a couple stories and share a couple lessons. And he, mentioned some things. There's always the things like the tragedy before the triumph, right? Which is this couple of the examples I've had. You get the confusion before the clarity, which is what's happened all this past year with all this coronavirus, right? Everyone's doesn't know what's happening, but it's good to kind of suss out. And I love brainstorming sessions where I'll bring my company in, I'll bring my staff in. I'm like, let's brainstorm on something. And I want good ideas and I want the bad ideas, because there could be elements of bad ideas that could be impactful for your final good idea. And so, you want to map those kind of learnings into your lives and make sure that you're tracking this as much as possible, and try, right? I try not to shoot down any idea or any solution for something, because there's always multiple ways to skin a cat. It's one of my favorite sayings from one of my old bosses. He was like, there's always multiple ways to skin a cat. And it's surprising when you look up, there are way too many ways to skin a cat, literally. So I wanted to kind of go into that sales strategy of authenticity. Just for one last lesson on that is I'm always trying to connect and create rapport and offer support and services, or a referral or introductions, right? Someone might say, oh, I'd really like to meet XYZ person that runs this company. Oh, surprisingly, I know that person. Let me make an introduction. Now you've got a warm intro into someone instead of a cold call, right? So doing that is super effective. When you're connecting with people and offering to give them introductions, that's super huge too, right? Now you're building a credit with them, right? You're building credit with them, saying, hey, this person helped me out. And whether you're keeping score or not, doesn't matter. That person indirectly knows that they owe you one. They owe you one. Hey, maybe I could return the favor and introduce you to someone, or refer you to someone that could be helpful to you personally or professional. So then that's when I say, oh, you want to pay me back? Well, just, if you can consider me for any of your real estate or construction needs, or refer me to anyone else in the area that I'd be interested to meet, because I'll make time to meet someone new. Because the thing is that you don't know who that person knows, right? You might say, and I know this is easy to do as a college person, you might look at someone and say, oh, this person's not going to be helpful to me, or they don't know anyone I need to know. And you don't know that until you dig in, right? I remember a couple of years ago, I had a manager that was working with me, and a young lady wanted to work in real estate under a company. And he told her, he's like, oh, expect not to make any money for 6 months or a year or longer. And I was like, well, that's the wrong attitude, because I don't know who she knows. What if she knows a person that's got $10 million houses to sell next week, right? And so he's like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. I was like, why not? Like, you don't know this person's Rolodex. And so you don't know anyone until you dig in and find out, and create rapport with them, and don't burn bridges, right? You want to build those bridges, because it could come back to help you out. Worst case, you just treated someone nice, and it should help you, sleep well at night, that you were good to someone, right? And so be nice, be friendly, build bridges. You never know who's going to be able to help you out personally, professionally, and in your life. That's it. That's all I got. Sean, where do we go from here?
Fantastic. I appreciate all of your thoughts and stories and perspectives there. I want to turn this over to you guys now from around the group for questions. We've got about 5 minutes we can take here for a Q&A. So any questions, observations, things you may want to learn more about, or things you're curious about, let's toss them. Feel free to throw those into the chat here. We'll take a couple questions with the time that we've got before we break out into our small groups for the evening. And feel free to type, or if you've got one right off the cuff, feel free to unmute as well. We're more than welcome to be flexible there too.
So one of the things I've learned from podcasting and interviews and stuff is to just always have questions ready. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. I'll try to think of like 5, 10 questions, regardless of what the situation is, just so I have something to say. So in something like this, we're like, all right, let me ask this question just so we can kind of get the ball rolling. And ideally, I want to ask my best question first, because I don't know if I'll ever get to a second or third question. So just as a tip in the future, if you guys are doing something like this and there's time for Q&A, get the question ready, right? I remember once years ago, I went to a movie screening, and it was like a premiere, and it was a Matthew McConaughey movie. And then sure enough, like Matthew McConaughey came out and was like, oh, I'm here, and I did this movie and it was cool. And who's got questions? And I was like, I don't know what the hell I'd say to Matthew McConaughey. Like, he's just there. And like, obviously all the women had a bunch of things to say and talk. So I'm glad I didn't have to say anything, because I was like, I'm not starstruck, so it wasn't that crazy to see Matthew McConaughey 10 feet away from me. But at the same point, I was like, shit, I wish I had something to say to this dude.
Yeah, I have a question. So I might have missed it actually, but you said that you hadn't like flipped houses before. And when you went to that company, what kind of made you stay? Like, what made you like flipping properties?
I didn't stay long, right? I stayed for a couple months until I was like, this guy's sketchy. I got to leave. And so I'm just going to start my own company. I think I can do it. And I took on a new partner that was helpful. I liked it because I like making deals. I like making win-win deals. And at that time, we were helping a lot of people that were pre-foreclosure. They were about to lose their house because they weren't making their mortgage payments. And I really took a genuine, open-hearted approach with them to be able to be helpful to them, right? Let's make a deal that makes a win-win sense, right? Oh, your kid's in school, you want to finish school out for the next 6 months? No problem. You keep the house for 6 more months and I'll take care of it then. Oh, you need extra money for a move out? Let me hire the movers for you. You don't even have to pay for them, right? So things like that. So I like making deals that people say, oh, thank you for listening and understanding my concerns, and making a deal that made sense for me. Does that answer it? So I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will say, I would love to flip houses. I'm great at decorating and picking tile. And I was like, well, great. Then you should get a job being a decorator and a tile picker, because that's not what flipping house is about, right? Flipping house is about getting leads and getting the deal done, right? And trying to, trying to keep your reputation intact at the same time, right? Watching HGTV and stuff like that, everyone thinks, oh, we could flip a house for $20,000. And they really Hollywood those shows, because the reality is much different than that. On average, I probably spend over $100,000 on each house that I work on, but that's because we have to put a lot of work into it. I'm now a licensed GC as well, so we do things right. I pass the inspections. So there's a lot of companies that'll try to hide major issues like foundation cracks or plumbing issues or leaks and mold and stuff like that. And that's just a very shady way to do things. And like I said, I'm not that kind of guy. And 2, I don't want that kind of reputation.
Great. Thank you.
Someone's asking some questions in the chat. What are some skills you use to running your company, working with your employees? I like the quote that you have to be slow to hire and quick to fire. So trying to really vet someone out before you bring them in is useful, right? I mean, hopefully you guys see this with your recruiting. Ideally, you're still using Balanced Man scholarships and that program to get some of the best people coming out of high school so you can get the best options for picking them into your college. Same, I'm trying to meet as many people as I can so that 1 out of 100 that's a good fit, I can bring them on and say, hey, I need you to join my team because XYZ, we'll have good synergy, we'll make it work together. So that's kind of my quick 30-second answer on that. Anything else on here that you're seeing, Sean? I'm trying to look through here real quick. Any challenges arise from having both a real estate company and construction company? Honestly, it hasn't been. I'm surprised that more people don't do it. It's been a good synergy because I can go to a lot of my network that are realtors, that are mortgage lenders, that are home inspectors, title officers, escrow officers, and say, hey, by the way, I'm a construction company, and they refer me to other realtors that have clients that need to get construction done or build an addition or build a guest house. And so it's been a good synergy for that. If you're looking into real estate and you can do a construction business too, then more power to you. Obviously, it'd be a lot of work if I was the project manager and doing the estimating and actually doing all the building too, but I've got a full team that takes care of that. And so it took a couple of years of startup before I started getting paid back, but it was worth it now.
So I think we'll take one more, and I think we can kind of combine the last two of the chat here. So this is a combination between Hunter Cox and Henry White. How have the values that you learned as a SIGEP help transition to your professional life and philosophy? And I think combining Henry's question in with this as well, what did that mean for your risk tolerance as you were looking at your values and your approach to your professional and personal life?
It's interesting because it's hard to keep track of where you pick your values up from specifically. I remember I did have a really good experience at SIGEP and with all the involvement I had and going to all the different leadership academies and stuff like that. And even now as an alumni, volunteering to help with some of these other leadership conferences and teaching SMART goal settings and stuff like that. So I know that there's so many things that you get taught and learned in these different leadership academies and sessions that can be useful. I mean, so kind of pick and choose. Life is now very much like the Vegas buffet. Anyone ever been to Vegas before? You guys ever been to a big buffet? And there's like 100 things that are great to eat, right? You can get the crab cakes, you can get the lobster, you can get the pizza and the prime rib, and you can't eat everything. So it's like you kind of take a look at what's out there. You walk through the line once, you figure out what your favorite things are, and you tick a few of those. And if you got room for more, then you go back and get some more. So it's like that with these kind of things. Like, I know Sean was telling you got to go to Ruck Leadership Institute, and I love going to sessions like that. And I still go to conferences and anything where I can learn, because there might be 1, 2, 3, 10 tips that I can get, that I can use, that I can be effective immediately. And so be humble enough to know that you don't know everything and that you don't have all the right skills. And if you're good at something, you're not as good as someone else, right? And so get better at whatever you think you're good at and learn what your faults are and try to fix those too, or at least recognize that those are issues you have so you can hire someone else that can complement you on the things that you're not good at. If you're running an organization, you want people that are a little bit different than you because you want people to come up with different ideas and solutions. And so it's hard to say which of those things came from SIGEP directly. I remember we had a fairly diverse chapter in terms of, where people came from, which states, which, in terms of their income class and stuff like that. There's some rich kids, there's some not rich kids. And it was interesting to be able to learn from everyone. And you get a lot of those learning experiences when you do these like overnight or weekend leadership trainings, and you have all these breakout sessions that you can be authentic and be vulnerable and share something that could be impactful to someone else. And it could be a learning lesson that ideally your learning lesson isn't something that someone else has to go through to take away the lesson. Was there a second part to that question?
I think the only other piece is what that meant for your risk tolerance.
The risk tolerance it's funny because I've been purposely trying to make friends that are more successful than me over the last several years, and it's been effective. And so now I've got some very wealthy friends that I hang out with that are pretty good guys. And I'm starting to work into commercial deals, like buying buildings, buying office buildings, buying commercial buildings and stuff like that. So I'm doing some of that now too. And I remember originally when he was like, "Hey, you should just do these commercial deals with me. They're a lot of fun. It's a lot more business. It's a lot less emotional. It's just numbers and relationships and facts. And if it works, it works." And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And I was like, "I don't have all those zeros." He's like, No. You know me and I have those zeros." And I was like, "Oh, if it works like that, then cool." So it's good to know someone that is willing to work with you, that can be helpful to you in business too. Because in that case, now I know that, with the network that I've got with him, with some other people that I know, that there's not a lot of opportunities that I could say that I have to say no to.
I love that as a through line. I think a number of the stories you've told is not just about you, but also the people that you bring along with you, and the attitudes, the philosophies that they share in the process. Well, Henish, thank you so much. I am walking away with myself I've got a full page of one-liners and zingers and quotes to keep with me to think about. I'm certainly hoping that everyone else here has that as well. Thank you for all of your time. Is there any final word that you would like to give before we break off into groups here for the night?
No, I appreciate everyone's attention and paying, and focusing on this. There's a lot of information that you're going to be pitched out. And if there's one thing that you can take away from what we discussed here today, then great. I'm available. Sean's, I'm happy to connect with anyone that wants. As I said, I'm all about relationships and rapport. And if you're on this planet, you're of interest to me. So let's stay connected. If I can be helpful to you in any way, then don't hesitate to reach out.